So apparently, some folks from Generation Z are making disparaging marks about Generation X, of all people, which happens to be my generation. And you all see this smirk on my face because, I mean, why would anybody ever bother us? We didn't have the opportunity that the baby boomers had. Hell, many of us didn't even have parents like the millennials had. We didn't have internet. We had 3 stations, 1 cable channel. Depending on what part of the country you grew up in, you maybe had 1 urban station. But for the most part, we didn't really have much. And so we were kind of left to our own devices. You were lucky if you had a bicycle. Shout out to Schwinn, many memorable days, hitting that front brake a little too hard and feeling the results thereafter, after I bust an endo without a cup. But I don't see why anybody would pick on us. I get it. The millennials complain about the economy crashing in 2008. This was right when they came of age, when they were getting out of college. And I know that you were promised that 6-figure job straight out of college with your bachelor's in arts in Afro science, dance theory. But that didn't work. And you had to deal with an economy. And then, of course, this was after 9/11 happened. So the world was different, much more difficult to travel and to get through TSA. But I don't think you all realize what we had to deal with. In 1974, when I was born, and mind you, Generation X is from basically 1965 to 1980 or 1979. So, in my opinion, and the way I look at it, we were the bastard children of the baby boomers. We were the children that came about after they had those one-night stands when they were in their 20s, still haven't built themselves up, some teenagers. And we were the trial kids. We were the kids they had when they were getting themselves together. And so for the most part, they didn't have enough time to even spend with us to properly raise us. So we kind of got guidance, and I'm not trying to disparage the parenting skills of the baby boomers, but I'm saying it did leave something. There were some absences and some deficits in their parenting skills. So for the most part, we were just thrown to the wind. I mean, there's really nothing they can do. 1970s, we start popping up. And at this time period, we're fresh out of the Vietnam War. You had a population of young people who are over-sexualized, and now they're entering into the market. The generation before them, our grandparents, kind of looked at them like ne'er-do-well heathens. So there was always a little animosity there, especially considering that they had gone off the beaten path. Everything that the greatest generation put together, the baby boomers kind of said, we're good. We're just going to smoke our weed and, eat our mushrooms and get wasted on LSD. And that's kind of where we are. And so the kids kind of suffered. Many of us grew up in homes where you didn't have a parent home. Either both parents worked, you had a single mom raising you. Divorce was a new thing, especially around about the 90s. And so as we came of age in the 1980s, you got to understand that, we were dealing with threat of nuclear war all the time. Like, we thought we were going to die. Russia was still over there. You had Mikhail Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, and they were always going back and forth. So we had nuclear war. Then in the early 80s, when some of us were hitting puberty and whatever, AIDS popped up. So now everybody's thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna catch AIDS and die, right? Because nobody really knew anything about it. Technology wasn't what it was. You really, if you didn't hear about it on the news, it's not really anywhere you can do any independent research, because the library would be the only place that you could actually learn about things. So it's not like you had Google at your fingertips. So you were kind of left in mystery. So these are the things that we began to grow up in. And then, of course, around about 1985, the crack epidemic hit. And people were doing dope, people were doing drugs, gangs were around. So the social life was a little different. And so for the most part, we didn't really have any coddling or nurturing. So we grew up like vagabonds. Your parents would let you out to go to school. Typically, you had to feed yourself. I mean, here's some crazy. People always talk about how the children, and I want you to understand how we were raised. The constant threat, the gang banging, the drugs, people dying, kids getting kidnapped. My God, at least you all get an Amber Alert on your phones. When I was a kid, they gave you a milk carton that you got from the store. And as you're eating your cereal and you turn that carton around, there was usually some missing kid who had been kidnapped. So as you're eating your cereal, getting ready for your long walk to school, you're reading about casually some kid your age who got snatched up by somebody. So this is what we had to deal with. And so we had to always keep our wits about us. I would say that Generation X probably didn't have a childhood. We had to grow up quick. So we've been grown a long time. I remember things like I'm 8 years old and I'm taking care of my 6-year-old and my 5-year-old. And we are walking 2-3 miles away from home in the urban inner city. And just to let you know the type of lack of supervision that I had, many of us had, my parents are just now finding out about some of the things that I did with my adolescent cousins, like starting a riot, breaking into literally starting a riot between a mass fight between some fraternity guys who lived across the street. They were having a party. We were at our my mom had left me there to go hang out with her friends. And my cousins were over, so we had a barbecue pit, on a little mini barbecue pit on the patio, and there were charcoal briquettes in there. And across the street, maybe 30 or 40 feet away, we can look down from my mom's second-story building in this huge apartment complex, and these frat boys were having a party. So, we decided it was a good idea to start throwing charcoal briquettes at them. And, as we rained down charcoal briquettes, it hit somebody, and then somebody turned around and hit somebody else. And then that person hit somebody else. And next thing you know, it was a slugfest at the fraternity house across the street from my mom's apartment. And like my mom is she just now found out about that, and I'm 50. You see what I mean? And this is stuff that we did when we were 8. And there's just so much other stuff. Breaking into the local schools, the public schools, breaking into the bungalows, vandalism. I mean, we would do stuff like jump from rooftop to rooftop with a 10-foot fall in the concrete to catch you. These are the sort of things we did, and our parents didn't know. Now contrast that to these new generations, right? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But you new folks, you got helicopter parents. They drop you off at school. When I was a kid, I had a conversation with my mom about possibly, hey mom, what do I do if we get kidnapped? What do I do if somebody trying to kidnap? She said, run, just don't get kidnapped. Like, wow, okay. You got 3 blocks to walk. Mind you, I'm in the 4th grade. You got 3-4 blocks to walk down the street. Make it there, make it back. Keep your wits about you. This is the advice you're giving a 10-year-old. Can you imagine letting your 10-year-old child in this day and age do some of the things that we did, like ride the bus from one part of town to the other, ride your bike for miles and miles on end, unescorted by yourself, just herds of kids in the street with bikes. You all don't do that. These young people don't even do that. So, we were, for the most part, feral. We were wild. We were, and it wasn't like we were innocent kids. We were doing stuff. You got bullied at school. I remember I came home crying one day after I got, roughed up by another kid. I'm 5. And my mom said, hey, if you don't fight him and beat him, you're going to come home and you're going to have to fight me. And so what other choice do I have? I had to fight. And so, for the most part, this is who we were. Nobody coddled us. We were on our own. We had to cook for ourselves. We had to shop for ourselves. I would walk. I lived over by USC in South Central Los Angeles on 37th Street. I would walk through the USC campus, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, across to the USC Village, watch a movie for a couple of bucks, and walk back home in the dark by myself. Ride the bus for dozens and dozens of blocks. Ride the bus to the beach, sometimes by myself. And so, this is a different kind of generation, very resourceful, very tough. And I don't understand why a generation of people who were raised to be soft would pick on us. Because, the truth is, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of people say it, we really don't care, in that we really don't care about fighting. We really don't care about you being in pain. We don't care about your feelings. And that's how we were raised. Even as a parent, I have to contrast my parenting style with that of some of the younger parents, because I just don't care if my kids are out there getting kicked in the stomach in their martial arts class. I'm like, all right, cool, you'll be all right. Just walk it off, get some water and get on back out there, because life is tough. And, I try to be empathetic with people, especially these folks who have these alternative genders and whatnot. I try to understand, but I don't care, and I don't know why you don't care if other people have something to say to you, because we really don't care. The other thing about Gen X, you can't punish us because we don't care about being alone. Most of us were raised alone. We literally came home, stayed in the house. We were there from the time we got home from school, maybe watched some TV, Transformers, until the commercials washed out. I used to watch Transformers, and then I would watch Three's Company, and some of those other shows, and then the PBS shows would come on, like Wild Wild America, Wild Wild World. I'd watch that stuff, watch my routine. I'd stay up late to 11, 12 o'clock watching Johnny Carson back in the day, and get up in the morning, get myself dressed, and be at school by 8:30 or 8:15. So we pretty much are independent. We don't really care what you think. We don't care about your opinions. So we don't care about your physical pain. And although we don't typically pick on people, because we learn very early on, if you pick on something, you might get your butt kicked, or at least you'd have to fight. So we don't bother people. But if you bring it to us, we're gonna bring it to you. See, those millennials, they kind of care. And the reason they care is because they were the generation of children that the baby boomers raised after they got their crap together. They were the ones that were raised in the suburbs. Mom had a station wagon style Volvo. This is the soccer mom generation. They were catered to. They had all the nice stuff for Christmas. People loved them. People cared about them. Yeah, we didn't get that, so we all right, whatever. We grew up on gangster rap and heavy metal. This is what we grew up on. Our favorite hip hop artists are dead. We grew up This is what all the most vile part of the 1980s and 90s came from people who were, for the most part, icons of our generation. And we liked it. Even the movies, the best horror movies, Freddy Krueger, Jason, Pinhead, Poltergeist, all this scary crap. You had people who were underage. There was no, it was PG and it was R, okay? So mom drops you off at the movie theater. You're in there watching movies, American Werewolf. I mean, you got the crap scared out of you, and then you had to go about your business. So we just learned to deal with stuff. You know, it's not, I don't need therapy. I'll tell you a story. I went to Manual Arts High School. Manual Arts High School, for you all who don't know, is part of the Los Angeles Unified School District. All of you have heard about Crenshaw, and you've heard about some of the other schools like Westchester. There's a lot of famous people from LA that went to Westchester and some of these other. I went to Manual Arts. I want you to just think of that name, Manual Arts. What do you think they taught there? They taught manual arts, plumbing, electric, auto mechanic, wood shop, carpentry. But by the time I get there, they cut the budget. So even though we had the shops, they didn't have any money for those. So, you know, it's just a bunch of young people growing up in the hood, and it's right on the corner of King Boulevard, Martin Luther King Boulevard, in Vermont, in the heart of South Central. And just so you know, anytime there is a school or some major institution on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in any city of America, that is the heart of the urban inner city. And that's where my high school was, right there. Not in the nice part of town, right there in the hood. And so one day, you know, I'm hanging out with my friends during the nutrition break that happens around about 10 o'clock. And lo and behold, I hear gunshots. I'm like, oh, well, it's normal for the area. I look over and there's a kid laying on the ground and 3 other people jumping the back gate to escape. So come to find out, a kid that I know from school got shot on campus. Oh my God, yeah, right? That's horrible, right? But this is 1990 something. This is not 2020 something. So SWAT team didn't show up. They took him to the hospital. I think he's all right. I think his name was Freddie. I forget his name. But we had a lot of El Salvadorian immigrants coming up from El Salvador and some of the other Central American countries. So it was a lot of conflict. This is when MS-13 was in its infancy. You had the Crips, you had the Bloods, you had the people who were just tough kids from the hood. The crack was hot. You know what I mean? You had people who were growing up in crack-addicted homes, folks on welfare, all right there. Nevertheless, gang violence. Nothing new. Happens all the time outside the school. But as this person got shot, you would think they would release the school, call the parents, come get your kids. No, they send us back to class, right? No therapy sessions the next day. They did a news article on it. Oh well, next to class. This is what we dealt with. Now contrast that to some of the stuff you see happening today. These kids, man, you guys aren't built the same as we are. You're not built to deal with the trauma. You're not mean as we are. You're not as prone to violence as we had to be. And, you know, we're older now, so we really don't, care, what you do. We just kind of want to be left alone. But golly, why would you pick a fight with these crazy psychopaths from Generation X? Because they really don't care. And here's something else I want you to understand. What I find, and when I talk to other people in my generation, because we kind of looked up and was like, damn, that's it? Is this all we got? We don't really have a childhood to look back on fondly. We didn't have great family lives. For the past 20, 30 years in our adulthood and middle age, it's kind of been like, so what? We're moving forward. We're going into our 50s and 60s and 70s, I guess. So it's like, man, you know what? As a generation of people who were told that they wouldn't live to be 26, we're kind of at a point where, we just don't care anymore. And I'm not speaking in general about every Gen Xer, But I'm saying these are people you don't want to mess with because they might not mind taking you out. You see what I'm saying? I mean, if you pick on the wrong one on the wrong day, they're really not afraid to go to prison. They're not really, don't really have a whole lot to, move forward to, so yeah, if it happens, it happens. I'll catch you next lifetime. But for the most part, you can't scare these people. So why pick a fight with them? You can't shame them. They don't feel sorry for you. They don't mind making you feel pain. And they're not afraid to go to jail or prison. So why would you mess with these folks, man? Whole different generation. No other generation like us. We're like, we're better now. We have families, we have stuff to live for, but there's still always that culture that we were raised in. And, you guys should just fall back. You little pink-haired, ear-nose, ring having, they, thems. Y'all need to chill, man. We're not the ones. Generation X, not the ones, man.